I hate making grand assumptions because they tend to be wrong, but I think this one is indisputable. I can assure you, anyone who likes the show The Boondocks hated Season 4 with a burning passion. Aaron Magruder begrudgingly left The Boondocks before Season 4's commencement. He was just ready for the show to end, and that's okay. I think it's important to quit while you're ahead because when you drag a show out for longer than it needs to be aired, for example, Fairly Odd Parents or SpongeBob, they tend to get soiled. Regardless, I've binge-watched the first 3 seasons of The Boondocks about 7 times, but I've only seen the 4th season once. I was fairly apprehensive about watching it since everybody hated it so much, and so when I finally got to it, I understood the backlash was just. It's a lot sharper than the animation on the previous season, which is saying a lot because Season 3 looked great, and I had a lot of fun watching the few action sequences. The problem lies in the storytelling and the overused plots. A lot of times, characters didn't really act like themselves, or the comedy just didn't work. The Boondocks storytelling was meant to be satirical, and the jokes were meant to criticize the society it existed in. It sort of used the same mechanisms as The Office, where the audience wasn't meant to laugh at Michael Scott's offensive jokes, but his ignorance. The Boondocks made sure to accent that the funny bit was meant to be the ignorance by having the voice of reason, namely Huey, provide common sense. Other times the dialogue and plot would assume that the audience was smart enough to comprehend what was going on. Whoever picked up where Magruder left off probably had this in mind, but didn't really understand Huey, Riley, and Granddad like he did. He even once said that they were his fictional blood relatives. The point of this series is to determine the ranking of the Season 4 Boondocks episodes so you don't have to rewatch it and figure it out yourself. There are 4 categories, equally weighted on a 5-point grading scale. Plot, comedy, execution of intent, and how true it stays to the original intention of the show, which I'll call Magruderism. And as always, when you disagree with everything that comes out of my mouth, be sure to tell me in my comments or on Twitter or something, I don't know. Overall, this episode was pretty average. It reminds me a great deal of the other episode regarding Tom and Sarah's relationship, and Usher, which happened 2 seasons prior. It had the same plot elements, Tom and Sarah going through a rough patch in their relationship. A hot artist shows up that seems to be better than Tom in whatever he's lacking in that moment. In the Usher episode, it was singing. In this episode's not being boring. And Tom gets insecure and seeks help, ultimately resulting in a fight. That exact sequence happens in both episodes. The only difference is one is good. And if you haven't figured out which one is good, I'll give you a hint. The one that did it first is the better one. Tom and Sarah are fighting again, but this time it's because Sarah wants Tom to be more masculine and more assertive and more unapologetic. Tom gets kicked out and sleeps outside of the Freeman house. The next day at his job, Pretty Boy Flizzy, which is Chris Brown, wants Tom to be his defense attorney for his criminal case involving him robbing a liquor store. Tom discusses this idea with Sarah over dinner and becomes jealous when she seems to want to use the connection to get to know Flizzy. Tom gets kicked out again. The next day, Tom agrees to take on Flizzy's case if he gives him relationship advice. Flizzy accepts. While clothes shopping, Tom invites Flizzy over for dinner and to perform at Jasmine's birthday party because Jasmine would want to meet him or something. At the house, the Freeman family invite themselves over, which didn't really serve a purpose because their only meaningful dialogue was outside the house when they warned Tom to keep Flizzy away from Sarah, so I don't know why they were still there. Anyway, they all eat. Sarah is drunk and says inappropriate things about beating women, so Tom gets mad and leaves. It's the next day presumably, and Tom is checking the security footage of the store Flizzy allegedly robbed, and figures out, by rewinding the tape, that it was staged. I still don't have any idea why the store manager didn't just check the entire incident's footage, because that seems like a pretty elementary thing to do for people with basic common sense, but he didn't do it, so Tom had to do it and figure it out on his own. I guess. Anyways, the day of the party, and Tom has to confront Flizzy about faking the robbery, so Flizzy reveals that he has to engage in these dumb shenanigans to stay relevant with his target demographic, thirsty women. Tom starts getting tense, and Flizzy notices that Sarah is watching their interaction, so he decides to do him a favor and picks a fight with him, and loses, so Sarah will think that he's less boring and more attractive. And that's the end of the episode. And it's sort of like the R. Kelly thing where fan bases of famous people seem to think that their favorite celebrity is beyond consequence and criticism, apart from now where everybody's kind of ready to accept that R. Kelly's guilty. I don't know where you guys were. He's been guilty. He's been peeing on children. There was an episode on that. And there's also the fact that this is just like the Usher episode because the plot is basically copy-paste. So I give this section of plot a 1 out of 5. The intent of this episode was to criticize the effect of affluence on the empathy threshold of celebrities and how it's perceived by society. This, I think, it did well. While the Usher episode was to explore the marriage between Tom and Sarah, and to really be about Tom and his character development or whatever, this is less about their relationship and more about celebrities. Though the lines weren't really they weren't funny at all. Pretty boy Flizzy is supposed to be a really irritating person to normal people. The amount of repetition should have been toned down because frankly it's just too much. For example, there were too many apology scenes on the TV when Granddad and the kids were watching, and he said, "Man, I was f***ed up too many times." The thing is though, even if I didn't laugh, it was still so obvious that I was supposed to think Flizzy was annoying and self-absorbed. It all wraps up pretty well with a cohesive conclusion. Flizzy acts like the worst to stay relevant with this primarily female audience and picks a fight with Tom where Sarah can see so he can appear like the man that she wants Tom to be. Yeah, that sounds right. 4.5 out of 5. The one time I did laugh, however, was when Huey dropped a Pop-Tart wrapped in toilet paper to Tom. It was a little gesture, but he made a big deal out of it, expressing to Tom not to let Granddad know because they weren't supposed to be feeding him. Part of me wants to believe that the joke was a recycled one from an earlier season. Maybe it's only funny because Huey said it. All that really matters is that I laughed. 0.5 out of 5. Although as I remember it, this is one of the episodes I deem more tolerable than its counterparts in season 4, but some things were still off about certain characters. For the most part, Huey was normal. He behaved similarly to how he did in the Usher episode, but made sure to warn Tom instead of offering support. Riley was also normal, except it seemed like he knew martial arts, the way he was animated, shutting off all the lights. This differs from his normal street fighting style and is more similar to Huey's. Granddad was a little bit more annoying at the doorstep, relaying to Tom why he shouldn't let Flizzy near Sarah because it just took forever. It just seemed like he was saying the same thing over and over and over again. The only other character that seemed out of the ordinary was Sarah, who throughout the episode excused all the bad things Flizzy did, like the woman beating thing. She even jokes about it at the dinner table, which is kind of strange to me because she's supposed to be like one of the more level-headed characters of the show. So, 2 out of 5. If I average the scores for each category, this episode got a 2 out of 5, putting it ahead of nothing because this is the first episode. Good night.